Chapter 1902. Luo Yen and the rest had intended to take advantage of the chaos to escape, but they were quickly pushed back by the raging energy. Looking at the sky that was collapsing inch by inch, listening to the constant cracking sounds coming from the ground, Luo Yen felt as if his body was being torn apart by countless forces. He hurriedly activated his force and set up a barrier around himself. However, that terrifying energy attack still sent chills down their spines. They even had to use all the energy in their bodies to barely stay where they were and not be swept away by the various forces. Luo Yen clenched his fists, his heart thumping so hard that it almost jumped out of his chest. Peach Blossom Cove's barrier had completely collapsed, and they had no way of getting out. Ink Sword Sect and Chu Luiwei wanted everyone to die with them. At the same time, the people in the city also sensed that something was wrong, and they all looked up. Not good. Peach Blossom Cove's barrier has been destroyed. With that, countless people began to run out of Peach Blossom Cove in a panic. However, the energy between heaven and earth had completely gone out of control. Those who were slightly stronger could barely hold on, but those who were not were already showing all sorts of reactions. Their faces were pale, and their breathing was ragged. Some could not bear the pressure of the rapidly collapsing space, and kept spitting out blood. In short, the situation was terrible. Ink Sword Sect was littered with corpses. Previously, the people in the city had all gathered and rushed over, surrounding Ink Sword Sect. Both sides had erupted into an intense battle. There were countless casualties. The air was filled with a thick, suffocating smell of blood. Ink Sword Sect wants all of our lives. Duan Qingchuan was the first to react, and he shouted. Everyone else reacted. That's right. If Ink Sword Sect had not insisted on chasing after Rong Xiu and Chu Luiwei, if they had not used that terrifying and strange Xian formation, if they had not ignored everything and triggered Tianlei, how could Peach Blossom Cove's barrier have collapsed? Everyone would not have fallen into such a dangerous situation. Intense anger and hatred filled everyone's hearts. The people of Ink Sword Sect, who were already at the end of their rope, sensed the tense and cold atmosphere, and they could not help but feel afraid. At this time, they also understood that Mo Yun and the rest had no intention of coming back to help them. He didn't even care about their lives. The barrier has collapsed. We are completely trapped here. Those who reacted first and tried to escape the Peach Blossom Cove were all stopped by the intertwining spatial turbulence. There were even some who were mercilessly swallowed by the collapsing void and never made it out again. Hearing those people's cries of pain before they died, the people behind them couldn't help but feel scared. It's over. Peach Blossom Dock is completely finished. We're all going to die here today. Someone muttered with a pale face, his eyes filled with despair. Even if I die today, I'll drag the Black Sword Sect down with me. In the deathly silent crowd, someone suddenly yelled out in a stern voice. These words were like a falling star, instantly igniting a raging inferno. The battle between both sides became even more intense. The people of the Black Sword Sect were already at a disadvantage. Now that the crowd was enraged, they suffered a crushing defeat. Not only the Black Sword Sect, but the entire Peach Blossom Cove had fallen into chaos. On the streets, countless people were running back and forth in panic. All kinds of trampling, collisions, and killing occurred continuously. When they realized that the Peach Blossom Cove was in a life-and-death crisis, no one could remain calm. At first, there were still many people who tried to escape from the collapsing barrier. But after the first batch died, the people behind didn't dare to act rashly. They were running to live, not to die. More people had already chosen to give up in despair. In the courtyard of the Black Sword Sect, Duan Qingchuan raised his saber and swung it down. At his feet, the corpses of the Black Sword Sect people were strewn all over the ground. The sounds of killing continued in the surroundings. It was almost like hell on earth. Brother Duan, the barrier has collapsed. Shouldn't we think of a way to retreat? Someone asked anxiously. Many people looked over when they heard that. After this incident, many people had already subconsciously regarded Duan Qingchuan as their backbone. So now that something had happened, they also subconsciously asked for Duan Qingchuan's opinion. Duan Qingchuan swung his saber and stabbed a fleeing Black Sword sect person to death. Warm blood splattered on his face. He raised his arm and wiped the blood away with his sleeve. Retreat? To where? His voice was very calm. Those who had stayed in the Peach Blossom Cove long enough would know how terrible the situation was. Although he had been on the Black Sword sect's side, he wasn't completely ignorant of the situation outside. Those who had tried to escape had all failed. Among them, there was no lack of powerful people. All of this proved that it was impossible for them to leave this place safely. Then we're just going to wait for death here? Yeah. We can't be completely helpless, right? There are so many people in the Peach Blossom Cove. Why don't we join forces? Maybe we'll have a chance? Seeing that Duan Qingchuan's attitude wasn't optimistic, many people panicked. For a moment, everyone was discussing. Although some of them were already prepared to die, most of them still hoped to survive safely. Duan Qingchuan suddenly raised his head and looked at the horizon. If someone can repair the barrier of the Peach Blossom Cove, maybe we'll have a chance to survive. Everyone fell into a dead silence. How could they not have thought of this? But the key was, this was as difficult as ascending to the heavens. The barrier of the Peach Blossom Cove wasn't man-made. It existed naturally. For thousands of years, the Peach Blossom Cove had never been occupied by anyone because of the existence of this barrier. Now that the barrier had collapsed, the void had collapsed, and the entire Peach Blossom Cove was in chaos. Who could repair the barrier? Everyone was just a mayfly at this moment. They couldn't even struggle. Who could save them? The sky was still collapsing, and the ground was shaking violently. The space was shrinking and squeezing inwards. Everyone who was in the middle of it could already feel the suffocating pressure. More and more people couldn't withstand the pressure and gradually collapsed. Most of the people from the Black Sword sect had been killed. But what was the use of that? If the Peach Blossom Cove was destroyed, all of them would die here. Duan Qingchuan held the long saber in his hand tightly. His lips were pursed as he looked at the distant sky, as if he was waiting for something. Boom! A loud sound was suddenly heard. Then, a faint blue flame shot up into the sky. It was a cluster of flames that suddenly surged out from under the crumbling mountain range. Mo Yun and the rest had seen this scene too many times before. So, they didn't take it to heart. However, before they could react, the ravines on the ground of the mountain range exploded like a string of cannons. Boom! Boom! Demonic and crazy flames covered the sky and covered the earth. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1903. Everyone was stunned. This flame, isn't it too much? On the mountain, in the forest, and in the valley. Even in every corner of the city, there were flames rushing out rapidly. The entire Peach Blossom Dock was engulfed in a sea of fire. The dark and gloomy sky was now illuminated by endless flames. The blue flames leaped and roasted the hearts of countless people. How could this be? How could this be? There is such a hidden danger under the Peach Blossom Dock? What are those flames? Countless questions lingered in the minds of the people, causing them to panic. The aura of this flame was tyrannical and extremely powerful. The Peach Blossom Dock's barrier had collapsed, and no one could enter or leave. Once the flames spread out, none of them would be able to escape. The discussion gradually died down. Someone was sobbing. Everyone in the city was in complete despair. Now, all they could do was wait for their deaths. A stream of light suddenly flew out from a cluster of flames. The stream of light drew a straight line in the sky and headed straight for Chu Luiyue. Many people saw this scene. What is that? I don't know. I didn't see it clearly. It seems like this is not the first time she has done this. Something seemed to fly out from the flames on the mountains outside the city. She seems to be looking for something in the flames. I remember now. The people of Black Sword sect were on guard against Lan Qingfeng. They seemed to be looking for something too. Everyone in Peach Blossom Dock knew what had happened during this period of time. Therefore, when someone reminded them, many people immediately connected the dots. With so many pairs of eyes watching, This conjecture could almost be completely confirmed. But what was that thing that flew out from the flames? Countless people looked at Chu Liwei. Of course, Chu Liwei knew what it was. When the stream of light flew over from below, she held her breath and held the black shield in her hand tightly. Crack. A familiar cracking sound was heard. Then, a piece of rust peeled off from the shield. A corner of the secret text was gradually revealed. Buzz. The stream of light flew to Chu Liwei. A thin blue crystal gently covered the area where the rust had peeled off. The sparkling light gradually shrouded it. The shield in her hand became heavier and heavier. However, this was just the beginning. The sound of air being torn apart came from all directions. Chu Liwei hovered in the air and looked down. Countless flames had already ignited in the huge peach blossom dock. Pieces of thin crystals flew out of it, wrapped in a brilliant light. The black shield seemed to be summoned by some kind of power and began to tremble. Chu Liue's hand was already numb, and her knuckles had turned white from using too much strength. However, she still used all her strength to hold the black shield firmly in her hands. Crisp cracking sounds could be heard. Pieces after pieces of rust peeled off the shield. At the same time, a terrifyingly powerful pressure. Puff! The blood in Chu Liue's body flowed rapidly, and her force was almost boiling. She suddenly spat out a mouthful of blood, and her face instantly turned incomparably pale. The bright red blood stain at the corner of her lips made her look even more haggard. The slight trembling of her body showed that she was under tremendous pressure at this moment. However, her black eyes were cold and gloomy. She was actually exceptionally calm. His eyes were burning with a raging fighting spirit. Countless streams of light came from all directions of the peach blossom dock. Bang! The golden armor on Chu Liue's body suddenly shattered under the impact of the surrounding spatial turbulence. Digression. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 1904. Rong Xiu's expression froze, and a cold glint flashed across his eyes. He bent his long legs and was about to go forward when he saw the black shield in front of Chu Liwei, which was already covered by a lustrous light, and he stopped in his tracks. At this moment, it was useless for anyone to go over. She could only rely on herself. Seeing this, the other members of the 13U sect also looked worried. Master! Sun Yi raised his hand and signaled for them to calm down. Big brother? This time, not only the 13U sect members, but even Sanson was a little hesitant. Master's situation didn't look too good. However, Sun Yi's expression was calm and didn't allow any disobedience. Although they were anxious, they could only stay where they were obediently. Hiss! Sanson wanted to say something, but he suddenly frowned. Third brother, what's wrong? 13 hurriedly asked. Sanson waved his hand, and his chubby face scrunched up. Nothing, nothing. It's just that small space is about to break. As soon as he said that, a stream of light flew up from the direction of Qingshui Cliff. That thin layer of blue was actually wrapped in a blazing flame and landed on the shallow spot where the rust had peeled off. Boom! Qingshui Cliff also started to collapse, as if it was being squeezed by the surrounding void turbulence. Large pieces of rock fell from the mountain. A loud sound was heard. Sanson's eyelids twitched violently, and he felt extremely pained. My baby! If that small space was destroyed, the loss would be immeasurable. As soon as he thought of this, his heart ached so much that it twitched. However, at this moment, Chu Liwei, who was suspended in midair, suddenly raised his hand. A silver-red divine realm flew out like a heavenly river pouring down. In the blink of an eye, it covered Qingshui Cliff. The fine light flickered quietly, and it was especially eye-catching in this chaotic situation. Sanson's eyes instantly lit up. Master had actually personally taken action to protect that small space of his. Master is too good. Sanson's eyes were almost brimming with tears. First it was despair, then it was hope. This feeling of rising and falling was simply too satisfying. His little heart couldn't take it anymore, okay? Xin Yi glanced at him indifferently and raised his eyebrows slightly, but he didn't say anything. So many mountains had been destroyed previously, but there was no movement on Master's side. However, just as there was movement on Qingshui Cliff, Master chose to attack without hesitation. This could only prove that Master was also very reluctant to part of that small space. However, seeing how agitated Sansan was, Xin Yi decided to be kind and not expose her. Master's God's realm. Wu Yao stared at the divine domain that was slowly flowing like a waterfall as he muttered to himself. Fifth, brother, you feel it too? Yu Jio nodded. I have the same feeling. When Qingshui of Qingshui, to cliff of the cliffs Qingjin. This was not the first time they had seen their master display his divine domain, but this time, it seemed like his aura and pressure were the strongest. God's domain can become stronger? 13 was at a loss. Don't exalted gods only have a chance to improve their god's realm after breaking through to venerable god? He was only a rank 7 warrior now and was still quite a distance away from exalted gods. Therefore, he had heard a lot about exalted gods from Xin Yi and the others. That's true for ordinary people, but our master isn't ordinary. Shi Fang sighed and then looked aggrieved. It's a pity that my vegetable garden, I'm afraid it's going to be destroyed again. On the first day he came to Peach Blossom Cove, he started to plant vegetables in the backyard excitedly. He thought that everything would go smoothly this time, but who knew that such a big thing would happen again? That was great. He couldn't eat the vegetables that he had painstakingly grown again. Shi Fang felt very sad when he thought of what had happened in the past few days. After a rough calculation, he realized that it had been a long time since he had a proper meal. Everyone looked at him. At this time, everyone in Peach Blossom Cove was in danger and was afraid of dying here. Shi Fang was the only one who was still thinking about those dishes. However, they quickly retracted their gazes. Shi Fang had always been like this and they were already used to it. They looked at Chu Luiyue in unison. They didn't know if their master could really deal with the situation in front of them alone this time. This Shangguan Yu, there's really a problem. The elders of the Nan family became even more flustered when they saw the flames that were ignited everywhere. If Peach Blossom Cove is completely destroyed, does she think she can survive alone? They thought that the people of Black Sword sect were crazy enough, but they didn't expect her to be even crazier. They wanted to drag everyone down with them. Luo Yan's face was gloomy as he suddenly took out a red scroll. The scroll was shrouded in a layer of faint light. A heavy pressure was emitted from it. When the people around him saw the scroll, they were all shocked. Flowing Cloud Flying Diagram? The Flowing Cloud Flying Diagram was a venerable divine artifact and the treasure of the Nan family. Unlike other venerable divine artifacts that were used for killing and were extremely aggressive, this treasure only had one use. No matter who the holder was, they could use it to forcefully open up space and teleport the holder to another place in an extremely short amount of time. In layman's terms, this was a teleportation formation that could be carried around. Most people might think that this thing was very ordinary and nothing special. However, only those who truly understood its power would know how powerful this thing was. During ordinary battles, this flowing cloud flying diagram might not be of use, but at critical moments, it could save one's life. Just like now. The void of Peach Blossom Cove collapsed and the barrier collapsed. The energy of heaven and earth was almost completely out of control. Luo Yan and the others had already tried to leave, but they all failed. Now, their only hope was the flowing cloud flying diagram. But wasn't this thing with young master? An elder said in confusion. Halfway through his sentence, he suddenly realized that he had said something wrong and hurriedly stopped. He looked at Luo Yan nervously. Luo Yan's face was expressionless. Before we set off, young master specially gave this thing to me for safekeeping. Originally, I wanted to return to the Nan family directly after killing Rong Xiu and Shangguan Yu. The elders fell silent. They looked at each other with their eyes and nose. In fact, they didn't believe Luo Yan's words. The flowing cloud flying diagram had a very high status in the Nan family. It had always been safeguarded by the patriarch. This time, It was likely that the patriarch had secretly given the item to the eldest young master to increase his leverage. Even if he couldn't win, he could escape. Nan Yuxing should know the importance of this treasure. Why would he give it to Luo Yan for no reason? It was obvious that he could use it himself and it could even protect his own life. But at this time, these questions were obviously unsolvable. Sush. Luo Yan waved his hand and the flowing cloud flying diagram quickly unfolded. Digression, there's the last update at 7 o'clock. Sorry, I'm trying my best to adjust these few days in February so that I can resume the update as soon as possible. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from the Love Network. Chapter 1905. A beam of brilliant light flew out from the crimson flowing clouds flying diagram. Then the light slowly spread out. Everywhere it passed, the space froze. The light rippled like water, and without anyone noticing, it had already connected to the void on the other side. From afar, it looked like a door with light flowing and floating quietly. Luo Yan made up his mind and walked forward. As long as he could use the flowing clouds flying diagram to leave this place, everything else would be easy. His speed was very fast. With a single step, he stepped into the swaying waves. The surrounding spatial turbulence seemed to have been isolated at this moment. Luo Yan pursed his lips and calmed down. The few elders standing behind him also became slightly excited when they saw this situation. The flowing clouds flying diagram was indeed worthy of its reputation. It seemed that they could really leave this place with this thing. However, at this moment, a sword aura suddenly broke through the air. Luo Yan knew that something was wrong and could only dodge. The half of his leg that had just stepped into the flowing clouds flying diagram was forced to withdraw again. A sharp and cold aura flashed in front of him. Luo Yan did not even have time to set up a barrier in front of him and a deep wound had already appeared on his face. A stinging pain came. Luo Yan's heart beat violently, almost jumping out of his chest. If his reaction had been half a second slower, then this sword chi might have sliced off his head. After the shock, there was a monstrous anger. He raised his head and looked at Chu Luiwei with hatred. She could not even protect herself, but she still had the mood to attack them. Shangguanyu, if you want to die, no one will stop you. Don't drag everyone down with you. Luo Yan shouted in a deep voice. The deep and cold voice spread far and wide in the sky. Chu Liuyue's lips curled into an extremely cold smile. Luo Yan, I can't agree with your words. From the beginning to the end, I have never thought of dying. I just don't want to see the person who harmed me live well. You! Luo Yan was furious and was about to refute when a strange voice suddenly sounded in his ears. He turned his head and his eyes widened in shock. Unknowingly, a layer of reddish-gold flames had covered the flowing cloud-flying diagram. At this moment, it was burning brightly. Under the influence of the flames, the spreading layer of light gradually dimmed. That was the space leading to the exit, which was gradually being sealed. Luo Yan almost couldn't breathe. This woman is so ruthless. She was the one who caused the current situation, yet she didn't allow anyone to leave. She was really crazy. However, at the same time, a deeper question suddenly appeared in his mind. The flowing cloud flying diagram was a genuine venerable artifact. Logically speaking, Chu Liuyue's strength alone should not have been able to deal any fatal damage to it. What's that? An elder behind him suddenly saw something and exclaimed in shock. Luo Yan followed his line of sight and saw that there seemed to be a transparent flame within the burning reddish-gold flames. The power of the two layers of pressure was far beyond their imagination. This is the karmic fire of the heavenly square cauldron? Luo Yan was experienced and knowledgeable, so he quickly recognized the origin of the transparent flame. When he thought of this, his heart instantly sank. The flowing cloud flying diagram was actually one of the 10 great divine artifacts. However, compared to the heavenly square cauldron, it was still slightly inferior. After all, it was not used for battle. To put it bluntly, it was a trump card used to escape and save one's life. However, the heavenly square cauldron was different. At this moment, The power of both sides was intertwined, and the difference was immediately apparent. What is she trying to do? Luo Yan's heart was filled with hatred. However, Chu Liyue's attention did not seem to be on this side anymore. She kept the red cloud sword in her hand and held the black shield with both hands. Most of the rust on it had already peeled off, and the heavy pressure was almost suffocating her. The lustrous glow enveloped it, and the engravings on it were faintly discernible. Its weight was increasing at an unimaginable speed, so much so that Chu Liyue could no longer hold the shield with one hand. She had to use both hands. Vigorous force continuously surged out from her dantian and into her limbs and bones. The force was burning wildly. Fine beads of sweat continuously appeared on her full and smooth forehead. Her face grew paler and paler, and only her pair of dark eyes seemed to be burning with flames. The sky had almost completely collapsed, and the ground was filled with ravines. Everywhere was filled with burning flames. At a glance, it was like purgatory. Chu Liyue took a deep breath and held her breath. The buzzing sound from the black shield reverberated in her ears, almost causing the force in her body to boil. On the other side, the people of Ink Sword Sect were also in a terrible situation. Chu Liyue had forcefully mobilized the Tianlei to bombard them, and each strike was fatal. The people of Ink Sword Sect had already depleted their strength and spirit due to the blood sacrifice formation. How could they withstand such a terrifying attack now? After a series of attacks, more than half of Ink Sword Sect was dead or injured. The huge blood sacrifice formation also started to churn violently. Inch by inch, Mo Yun knew that there was nothing he could do. His body trembled, and his heart was filled with resentment and resentment. Boom! Finally, the blood sacrifice formation completely collapsed. The people of Ink Sword Sect standing at the edge could not escape in time, and were all swallowed by the violent blood qi and energy. Mo Yun also suffered a great impact, and his body flew backward. Finally, his eyes were completely filled with a scarlet color. Just when everyone thought that he was done for, they suddenly saw him forcefully stabilize his body. The next moment, he looked at Chu Liyue. "Shang Guanyu, you forced me to do it this time." His cold and gloomy voice was filled with a violent and cold killing intent. At the same time, a totem suddenly flashed between his eyebrows. Chu Liyue looked up, and her eyes were instantly covered with a thick layer of frost. She could not be more familiar with that totem. Black Demon Cave. The so-called Ink Sword Sect clearly had an extremely close relationship with Black Demon Cave. Black Demon Cave sent you here? Mo Yun sneered. But he didn't reply as he quickly ran toward Chu Liyue. The surrounding heaven and earth energy suddenly gathered toward him like crazy. In just a few breaths' time, his strength had recovered to the peak of Supreme God. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1906. After letting go of his last line, Mo Yun no longer had any scruples as he frantically devoured the surrounding energy to forcefully raise his own strength. Seeing that Black Sword Sect was unreliable, he could only rely on himself. Even though the sect leader had repeatedly warned him to be careful and not reveal his identity unless it was absolutely necessary. But now, he had no other choice. If this went on, what awaited him was only death. Today, even if he were to die, he would definitely drag these people down with him. However, before Mo Yun could reach Chu Liyue, he was stopped by someone. A tall and slender figure broke through the air and blocked Mo Yun's path in the blink of an eye. It was Rong Xiu. Looking at that noble and devilish face, Mo Yun's heart was filled with hatred. Even at this time, this man's expression was still so calm and composed. It was as if there was nothing in this world that could make him nervous or fearful. The more he was like this, the more intense the emotions in Mo Yun's heart became. Based on what? Based on what, after this battle, those from Black Sword Sect were either dead or injured while these people on the other side were not affected at all. Rong Xiu, you are no match for me. Mo Yun shouted sternly. At this point, Mo Yun could see that Peach Blossom Cove was about to be completely destroyed. Everything that they had spent countless manpower and resources to prepare in the past 2 years would all turn to nothing. Even the countless cultivators here would have to pay with their lives. Mo Yun naturally did not care about the lives of those people, but he cared about himself. At this time, he had already used a secret technique to forcefully recover and raise his strength. But in the face of the collapsing void and the rampant turbulence, he still felt helpless. And all of this was Chu Liyue's fault. If she had not summoned so many flames, if she had not forcefully controlled the Tianlei, if she had not, at this time, Mo Yun had forgotten that the Nan family and Black Sword sect were the first to act. If they had not insisted on pursuing Chu Liyue and the rest and paid a huge price for it, things would not have turned out this way. However, a person like him would never reflect on himself. Therefore, he still blamed all his resentment on Chu Liyue and the others. Rong Xiu raised his eyebrows slightly. Oh, it seemed that the Black Demon Cave had not learned their lesson. His tone was light, and there was even a slight smile on his lips. His entire person looked elegant, noble, and elegant. However, when Mo Yun looked at that pair of eyes that were as deep as a pool, he suddenly quivered. He suddenly recalled a rumor from a few years ago. It was not accurate to say that it was a rumor, because that incident had really happened. However, he had never personally experienced it and had only heard about it from others. It was said that a few years ago, Rong Xiu had gone to the Black Demon Cave alone and directly attacked their lair. The Black Demon Cave suffered heavy losses in that battle. Not long after that incident, they even chose to live in seclusion. Although Mo Yun knew that the reason why the sect leader had made such a choice was not entirely because of Rong Xiu, he had to admit that these matters had a significant impact on each other. Especially, at that time, Rong Xiu had indeed killed many people from the Black Demon Cave. Among them, there was no lack of people of high status and power. Mo Yun happened to be out at that time and had just avoided this fierce battle. Therefore, many details about that battle were heard from his fellow sect members one after another. This matter was almost a taboo in the Black Demon Cave. Many people were still afraid when they mentioned the scene of that man killing his way into the Black Demon Cave alone. Mo Yun had not seen Rong Xiu with his own eyes. Otherwise, he would not have known the identities of Rong Xiu and Chu Liyue only after the Nan family came to interrogate him. Because he had not personally experienced it, he had always maintained some doubts about these claims. Even after knowing Rong Xiu's identity, his first thought was to kill him. Until now, he and Rong Xiu faced each other face to face. When he met the man's cold and indifferent eyes, he suddenly remembered all the things he had heard before. Rong Xiu, he really had great strength. Mo Yun's throat was a little tight. He was not stupid. On the contrary, in most cases, he was very astute and intelligent. Otherwise, the higher-ups would not have sent him here to establish the Black Sword sect and be in charge of many things here. He intuitively felt a fatal danger. And this danger came from Rong Xiu. Rong Xiu gently raised his wrist, and a cluster of golden flames gushed out from his palm. Scorching, burning. At the same time, the incomparably wild energy in the surroundings began to obediently surge towards his flames. Including the energy that was rushing towards Mo Yun, it was forcibly snatched away halfway. Mo Yun's face was ashen, but his heart was uneasy. From this move alone, he could tell that Rong Xiu's strength was not inferior to his, and was even stronger. Could not go head-to-head with Rong Xiu. Mo Yun made a prompt decision, and with a sidestep, he planned to go around Rong Xiu and attack Chu Liyue first. However, how would Rong Xiu give him this chance? Swoosh. His slender and well-proportioned fingers waved gently. The incomparably bright golden flames transformed into a long whip and went straight towards Mo Yun. Before Mo Yun could escape, he felt a golden light flash in front of his eyes. Then, a burning pain came from his ankle. He looked down in panic and saw that one of his calves had been tightly bound by the flames. The blazing flames burned fiercely, and in the blink of an eye, his trousers had turned into ashes. The intense burning pain came quickly. Mo Yun's face turned pale. He was a god expert, and ordinary flames could not get close to him. But Rong Xiu's fire was also very powerful. Wrapping around his ankle was not the most important thing. What made Mo Yun's heart tremble the most was that after the flame wrapped around him, the force in his body seemed to have been suppressed and sealed by some kind of power. It could not be mobilized at all. Without being able to use force, no matter how powerful a cultivator was, he could not unleash his strength. Mo Yun was shocked and furious. Wasn't Rong Xiu also a god like him? But why was the difference in strength between the two of them so great? In comparison, Rong Xiu could practically crush him easily. Just as Mo Yun was thinking about this question, Rong Xiu had already lashed out with his whip. Mo Yun's body flew out uncontrollably. He crashed heavily on a mountain peak. Bam! Rumble! Accompanied by these two sounds, that mountain peak actually collapsed directly after receiving this powerful impact. Countless huge rocks rolled down. Mo Yun's body was drowned in it very quickly. Rong Xiu's eyes were cold. Don't delay my violators. This is the consequence. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 1907. A cold and deep voice spread between heaven and earth, landing clearly in everyone's ears. The people of Black Sword sect were basically all dead. As for the people of Nan family, after hearing this, they felt that it was extremely ear-piercing. These words were clearly meant for them to hear. It was fine if Rong Xiu did not make a move, but once he did, he used a killing move right away. He was killing the chicken to warn the monkey. Luo Yan was filled with rage as he looked at the flowing cloud flying diagram that was still burning in front of him. The flowing cloud flying diagram was a venerable divine weapon and would not be damaged easily. Therefore, he was not worried that Chu Liyue's flames would destroy it. However, he knew very well that with Chu Liyue's interference, they would definitely not be able to use the flowing cloud flying diagram to leave this place. The space in all directions was crazily squeezing towards the center. If this continued, the entire Peach Blossom dock would completely collapse before long. I'm afraid we won't be able to get out. The expressions of the elders turned extremely ugly. Before they came, they had never expected things to develop to this stage. Putting aside Nan Yuxing's death, all of them would probably be buried here as well. Even Mo Yun is not a match for Rong Xiu, this was not to say that they were weaker than Mo Yun. It was just that when Mo Yun attacked earlier, the strength that he displayed was already extremely strong. Moreover, he went with great determination at that time, almost cutting off all means of retreat. Even so, he only managed to exchange one move with Rong Xiu. How good would the situation be for the rest of them? I think Rong Xiu's strength has clearly surpassed that of an ordinary venerable god. An elder gritted his teeth and said, "But his aura is indeed that of a venerable god," another elder said hesitantly. Perhaps he borrowed some external power? The elders had different opinions. However, they also knew that it was useless even if they knew this at this time. Luo Yan suddenly raised his head and looked at the sky. Inch by inch, the ground collapsed and large black holes spread out. It was like a giant beast opening its bloody mouth to devour everything. Countless surging dark clouds had already been devoured by now. Only a few strands of Tianlei were still wandering around. It was Tianlei who had been summoned by the blood sacrifice array. Before all of them landed, the blood sacrifice array had already collapsed. All that was left were the Tianlei, which wandered about in the sky uncontrollably. At this moment, as if affected by the spatial compression, the Tianlei began to converge towards the center. What was even more surprising was that they seemed to be merging with each other. The most important thing was that they were gathered in the air above Chu Liyue's head. Looking at this scene, Luo Yan suddenly muttered, "So what if you're a venerable god? Can he compete with the heavenly Tao?" The elders were stunned when they heard this. Heavenly Tao? What did he mean by that? They looked at each other and subconsciously followed Luo Yan's line of sight. The wind howled, and the energy was rampant. Everything looked the same. However, Tianlei in the sky was converging and merging. A dazzling light suddenly surged out from within. The elders all sucked in a breath of cold air. That was God-destroying tribulation. As the name suggested, the God-destroying tribulation was a heavenly tribulation used to destroy a venerable god. Legend had it that the God-destroying tribulation was dazzling and was born from the heavenly Tao. It was extremely powerful. Whenever it descended, it would be a calamity that could destroy the world. However, the God-destroying tribulation was extremely rare. In the world of divine ruins, there might not be a single person who could summon it in 1,000 years. Therefore, most people had only heard of it in rumors and did not have a deep understanding of it. In their opinion, this was indeed a phenomenon that only existed in ancient books. Therefore, when this God-destroying tribulation appeared, even Luo Yan looked at it for a long time before he dared to confirm it. This was the legendary God-destroying tribulation. Moreover, the person who was going to destroy it was Chu Luiyue. It's really the God-destroying tribulation. The elders were all dumbfounded, their faces filled with shock. But that's not right. Isn't the God-destroying tribulation something that only venerable gods can summon? Shangguan Yu is the venerable god. How could it be Rong Xiu who summoned it? No, it's Shangguan Yu. Can't you see that the God-destroying tribulation is gathering above her head? Heavens! Is this really the God-destroying tribulation coming for her? How could a mere venerable god? Could it be because of the mountain fire? The Nan family was not the only one who was puzzled. At the same time, countless cultivators who were watching the situation in Peach Blossom Dock were also stunned. Some of them had sharp eyes and immediately recognized that it was the God-destroying tribulation. The news quickly spread among the crowd. Everyone was stunned on the spot. They did not expect that Chu Luiyue would summon a God-destroying tribulation at such a critical moment. This was one disaster after another. It's over. It's completely over this time. Countless people were filled with despair and had already given up. Mo Yun struggled out of the pile of rocks. His body was already covered in wounds. He did not have time to be resentful. He looked up at the sky and saw the God-destroying tribulation that was gathering. His eyes widened, and his body trembled. Once the deity-destroying tribulation descended, all of them would most likely die. He clenched his teeth, and a look of determination flashed in his eyes. Then, a cloud of black mist suddenly spread out from his body. The totem between his eyebrows became brighter and weirder. A vast and mighty aura descended from the sky. Chu Luiyue looked up. The gorgeous Tianlei was still gathering power, and it would descend at any time to judge her. She clenched the black gambling token in her hand. What was this? How could it summon the God-destroying tribulation? Boom! Just as this thought flashed through her mind, the God-destroying tribulation had already descended. The biting cold aura instantly cut countless wounds on Chu Luiyue's body. However, at this moment, the sound of a zither rang out from within her body. Digression 6.0 Clocked mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 1908. Chu Luiyue felt that there were two forces fighting each other inside and outside her body, and her physical body was the battlefield. The sound of the zither rang out, and endless surging force rushed out, quickly pouring into her limbs and bones, nourishing her injuries. Those bloody wounds began to heal and scab at an astonishing speed. But as the pressure of the God-destroying tribulation continued to increase, some bloody wounds ruptured. One side was destroying, and the other side was repairing. Chu Luiyue's body endured these two forces at the same time, and soon became a bloody person. She wore a red dress, and dark red blood gushed out from her body, quickly disappearing on her clothes. If one didn't look carefully, one wouldn't be able to see anything. Only her increasingly pale face showed what kind of terrible torture she was suffering at this moment. Chu Luiyue's two hands had long lost feeling. At this moment, she was just relying on the last bit of willpower to barely hold on, holding the black shield in her hand tightly. The rust on it had almost completely peeled off. Countless faint blue crystals covered it. A faint glow almost enveloped the entire shield. The secret text engraved on it was faintly discernible. Sensing this movement, Rong Xiu looked up. When he saw the gorgeous and brilliant God-destroying tribulation appear, he narrowed his eyes slightly, and a look of deep thought flashed across his eyes. It actually directly summoned the God-destroying tribulation. He put one hand behind his back and gently curled up, but his feet didn't move. From the looks of it, he was planning to wait and see. Big brother, that's the God-destroying tribulation? Sanson widened her small eyes in shock and asked in disbelief. Sun-yi nodded. Although it was his first time seeing it, but, with this appearance and state, there was no doubt that it was the God-destroying tribulation. Hiss. Seeing his affirmative nod, Sanson sucked in a breath of cold air. But isn't Master just a high god now? How can he summon the God-destroying tribulation? Wu Yao and the others also looked over nervously. Previously, their big brother had told them to wait patiently, and they had done so. But now, they really couldn't calm down. God-destroying tribulation. This was because the heavenly Tao had sensed a threat and wanted to annihilate him. Even if one used their toes to think, they would know how terrifying this was. No matter how powerful Master was, his own realm was still there. Rumor has it that only 10 to 20% of the God annihilation tribulations can safely pass through them. Master is a high deity. What should we do? Sun Yi's brows quickly furrowed, but he quickly relaxed. He paused for a moment before saying, the deity annihilation tribulation is indeed dangerous. However, those who can pass the deity annihilation tribulation will all become powerful figures in the world. This was an opportunity that thousands of cultivators could only dream of in their entire lives. Master was still a high deity, but he was able to summon the deity annihilation tribulation. This showed how strong his potential was. For Master to encounter such an opportunity, we should be happy for Master. The remaining people smiled bitterly. They naturally understood what Sun-yi was saying. But the key point was, what if Master couldn't get through it? One had to know that even the most powerful supreme gods might not be able to survive the God annihilation tribulation, let alone Master. It wasn't that they didn't believe in their Master's strength, it was just, this matter was too outrageous. Even the 13U sect, who had always thought highly of their Master, panicked at this moment. They really didn't dare to make this bet. Little Hachi suddenly stretched. Since Big Brother has said so, let's not worry for nothing. Besides, if Master really can't get through it, we can just go with him. What's there to be conflicted about? In any case, she was very open-minded. Her life was Master's. As long as Master was here, she would be here. If something happened to Master, she would follow without hesitation. These words didn't sound good. It could even be said that they were very depressing. However, the miraculous thing was that after hearing Little Hachi's words, the remaining people were instantly less nervous. It made sense. The worst outcome was nothing more than this. It wasn't like they hadn't experienced it before. There was nothing to be afraid of if the same thing happened again. Besides, Master had many trump cards. Perhaps, he could really win? Chu Luiyue didn't know what everyone was thinking. At this moment, all her attention was placed on the black shield in front of her and the God-destroying tribulation above it. Under the pincer attack from both sides, she felt as if her whole body was being torn apart. Terrifying energy rushed back and forth. The pressure of the God-destroying tribulation was getting heavier and heavier. The zither music in her body was also getting more and more desolate. Chu Luiyue's ears were filled with a roar. She could no longer hear any sound from the outside world. Faint luster kept flickering in front of her eyes. The weight on both of her hands kept increasing. She could only clench her teeth and stare. Finally, the last piece of rust on the black shield was peeled off. Then, the last piece of faint blue crystal flew out from the city below. It gently covered it. At this moment, the entire Peach Blossom Dock was in a mess. Countless faint blue flames were burning all over the Peach Blossom Dock. The entire city had almost turned into a sea of fire. Chu Luiyue stood in midair. She could even feel the burning aura in the air. When the last piece of thin crystal flew over and covered it perfectly, Chu Luiyue could clearly hear a chanting sound that seemed to come from an ancient time and space. Her mind was shocked. Then, the secret text on the entire black shield finally appeared completely. At the same time, all the Tianlei in the sky had gathered. It condensed into an incomparably gorgeous god-destroying tribulation. When the luster on the black shield gradually dissipated, the god-destroying tribulation also crashed down. The target was Chu Luiyue. Digression: at about 6:30 p.m. mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1909. Reddish gold flames instantly ignited around Chu Luiyue. However, the god-destroying tribulation was extremely fast. In just an instant, Chu Luiyue's figure was devoured. Boom! Endless resplendent streams of light shot out in all directions. Even the silver-red god realm that Chu Luiyue displayed at the start was affected as well, and it was instantly scattered into pieces. Below, the mountain range that was already in a mess started to collapse again at a visible speed. In the blink of an eye, it was razed to the ground. Sun Yi quickly set up a green barrier in front of him and shouted at the same time, "Retreat!" Hearing his order, the 13 Yu guards instinctively retreated. Even so, they still suffered a great impact. The colorful streams of light flew over and collided with the barrier that Sun Yi had set up. They silently devoured each other and killed each other crazily. Sun Yi was the first to bear the brunt. His chest shook, and blood seeped out of the corner of his mouth. "Big brother!" Sanson and the others were shocked. In their impression, Big Brother was almost invincible. He had never been in such a sorry state. However, this was merely the aftermath of the god-destroying tribulation. Their master, who was facing the full-force attack of the god-destroying tribulation, was in even more danger. Sun Yi forcefully swallowed the taste of blood that surged up his mouth. Without stopping, he continued to lead everyone in retreat. Danger! Almost at the same time, Luo Yan and the others on the other side also sensed that something was wrong. Luo Yan shouted and immediately retreated. However, an elder chose to go forward. Flowing cloud flying diagram. This was the treasure of the Nan family. If it was lost, however, just as his hand touched the burning flowing cloud flying diagram, a colorful stream of light suddenly flew behind him. Luo Yan and the others' expressions changed. Dodge! That elder also felt a gust of cold wind coming from behind him. He knew that something was wrong and immediately grabbed the flowing cloud flying diagram and fled. However, it was still too late. That stream of light was simply too fast. He had just taken a step when the colorful stream of light behind him directly pierced through his chest. Blood splattered everywhere. The warm and sweet blood even splashed onto the faces and bodies of Luo Yan and the others. Their hearts were filled with shock, and they were all stunned. The elder threw out the flowing cloud flying diagram with great difficulty, then spat out 2 words with great difficulty. Go. Luo Yan subconsciously borrowed the flowing cloud flying diagram. The scarlet gold flames and the transparent flames intertwined and enveloped him. It was boiling hot to the touch. Fortunately, the flowing cloud flying diagram was also one of the 10 great saint artifacts. Although the flames could destroy the spatial tunnel it created, it would not cause fatal damage to the diagram itself. Furthermore, Luo Yan himself was a god. With a thought, a layer of silver armor quickly covered his arm. He clenched the flowing cloud flying diagram tightly in his hand and retreated at full speed at the same time. The other elders didn't have time to say anything and could only follow closely behind. By the time they managed to dodge the attack of the colorful light, they had already flown quite a distance away. After making sure that he had avoided the fatal threat, Luo Yan stopped and looked back again. He saw the body of the elder from the Nan clan explode. A terrifying energy wave came crashing down, instantly crushing him into dust. His body and soul were destroyed. He didn't even have time to cry out in pain. Luo Yan's heart was beating violently, the blood in his body seemed to be boiling, and his temples were throbbing. The scene in front of him had a huge impact on him. If they were a step too late just now, then the consequences were simply unimaginable. Luo Yen had been a god for many years. It had been too long since he felt such a fatal threat of death. The three elders standing beside him were all stunned at this time. A god powerhouse was gone just like that? The power of the god-destroying tribulation was so terrifying. Even a scattered aftershock had such a terrifying power. Then, Chu Luiyue, who was at the center and endured the most pressure of the god-destroying tribulation, would die without a doubt. Mo Yun was originally hiding in a pile of rocks, planning to wait for an opportunity to move. However, the arrival of the god-destroying tribulation completely shattered all his plans. The rocks shook, the earth shook, and the mountains shook. The thick fog on his body had already covered more than half of his body. However, the power of this god-destroying tribulation was too strong. It was already difficult for him to avoid these aftershock attacks, let alone other things. If this continued, he was afraid that he would really die here silently. Mo Yun was unwilling in his heart. The totem between his brows suddenly became even brighter. The thick color of blood filled his eyes. A smell of a corpse suddenly emitted from his body. His eyes also gradually became ice-cold and bloodthirsty. However, right at this time, a golden flame suddenly flew over. Mo Yun suddenly realized something and raised his head to look. That ball of golden flame already flew in front of him. Just as he was planning to dodge, that flame actually directly exploded in front of him. Boom! For a moment, sparks scattered. In a blink of an eye, it completely wrapped Mo Yun. Just as he was about to struggle and escape, a thick blackness suddenly gushed out from that golden flame. The cold and ruthless aura immediately made Mo Yun open his eyes wide in shock. This was swish. Without waiting for him to open his mouth, that blackness already swallowed him. Mo Yun was dead. The golden flame followed closely and spread up. From the outside, no one detected any abnormality. Very soon, the flame dissipated, and a wind blew over. It raised a handful of flying ashes. No one would have known that the once glorious Mo Yun, the deputy sect leader of Mo Sword Sect, actually died silently in such a way. In fact, at this moment, no one cared about him anymore. Everyone's attention was on Chu Luiyue. Countless pairs of eyes were looking at that bright and gorgeous ball of flame in midair. Who could withstand the descent of the god-destroying tribulation? The space was still constantly collapsing. The world was dark. They were very clear that when this ball of flame dissipated, everything would be over. And Chu Luiyue, what a pity! All of us are going to be buried with her. In the Peach Blossom Cove, someone sighed dejectedly. In the crowd, Duan Qingchuan frowned and was about to explain when he suddenly saw something and suddenly opened his eyes wide. What is that? When everyone heard that, they all subconsciously looked over. They saw that in that dazzling ball of flame, something suddenly flew out. Someone murmured with uncertainty, "It seems to be a stone?" Digression, accumulating power. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 1910. It was indeed a piece of rock. It was about the size of a fist and was grayish-white in color. It rolled out of the brilliant flame as if someone had accidentally thrown it out. Many people were stunned. The reason for that was because the appearance of this stone in such a situation was truly untimely. Why would such a thing appear out of nowhere? But soon, the second stone also rolled out shakily from within. At this moment, the raging power of the god-destroying tribulation had completely messed up the surrounding space. Countless crazy spatial turbulences intertwined as if they were going to tear everything apart. However, the two stones didn't seem to be affected by the fluctuation at all. They just rolled away. At first glance, it was no different from being on flat ground. Before the crowd could react, the third rock appeared and went in another direction. At this moment, time seemed to flow extremely slowly. Countless pairs of eyes were fixed on the strange scene in the sky. With the ball of flame as the center, more and more rocks rolled out and scattered in all directions. Under the brilliant light, these rocks looked ordinary. Because of this, Their appearance was extremely strange. These rocks rushed out of the God-destroying tribulation's power. Why aren't they broken? Someone muttered in a low voice. Many people were stunned when they heard this. That's right. When the God-destroying tribulation descended, even the mountain peaks below collapsed one after another and were completely destroyed. Why were these small rocks not affected at all? No, aren't you curious about where these stones came from? Of course, they could not have come from the God-destroying tribulation. Then, the only explanation was Chu Luiwe. These rocks must be hers. But this was even more puzzling. She was trapped in the God-destroying tribulation and no one knew if she was dead or alive. How could she have the time to throw these rocks out? There seems to be something coming out of those rocks. His exclamation was like a stone thrown into a calm lake, causing ripples to form on the surface of the water. Everyone looked over. Soon, the crowd was noisy again. It seems to be true. What's that blue thing? Hey, the one beside it is green. Why do these rocks seem to be different? With the passage of time, the originally gray, unremarkable, and even somewhat ugly stones began to glow with all sorts of colors. Although they could not be compared to the brilliant light of the God-destroying tribulation, they were still quite dazzling when scattered. The void collapsed and there were black holes everywhere. The appearance of these streams of light were like stars that lit up the darkness. Suddenly, someone exclaimed in shock. Those don't seem to be ordinary rocks. Those streams of light are God domains. As soon as he said this, everyone was shocked. They were actually very familiar with the words God domains. After all, those who could survive in the Peach Blossom Cove were mostly divine-level experts. When they fought with each other, they had more or less seen the God domains of other cultivators. But at this time, for them to connect these stones with the divine realm was still far beyond their imagination. God domain? How is that? Only deity-rank powerhouses could condense a deity domain. No matter how powerful these stones were, they were also dead objects. How could he display his divine domain? Could it be that you were too scared and made a mistake? There were different opinions. However, everyone obviously did not believe this. It was not that they had any opinions about the person who said this, but the matter itself was very ridiculous in their eyes. Therefore, they instinctively chose to refute. Look carefully. That really looks like a God domain. Why would I lie to you at this time? Seeing that everyone did not believe him, the person was a little anxious. He raised his finger and pointed at the rocks that were scattered in the sky. Look for yourselves. If those streams of light are not God domains, what are they? Under his repeated pleading, some people raised their heads to look at him in disbelief. At this time, those rocks were basically surrounded by various streams of light. Looking from below, balls of light were flickering. The light was not dazzling, but it seemed to be wrapped in a vast aura. Some people's expressions changed. This aura, it was indeed a God domain. It really seems to be. Those who had objected solemnly just now were stunned and stammered. The noisy crowd quickly quieted down. This was because the impact of this matter was too great for them. After a while, someone muttered in a low voice, "How is this possible? Am I too inexperienced? Is there really a God domain in this world without cultivators? No, it's not your problem. I'm afraid that in the entire divine ruins, there has never been such a situation. It seems that Peach Blossom Dock is really finished. A high god expert summoned a god-destroying tribulation, and the broken rocks have God domains. This is crazy. This is crazy." Too many unbelievable things had happened, so much so that people began to doubt whether everything in front of them was real or just an illusion. However, while most people were shocked and lost, there were still a few people who maintained their last bit of rationality. A somewhat childish voice suddenly came from the crowd. "Daddy, these rocks are scattered like this, like. The person who spoke was a little girl who was about 7 or 8 years old. She looked up with a sincere expression, but there was a trace of doubt in her eyes. She felt that this scene was somewhat familiar, but she could not recall it. When Duan Qingchuan, who was standing not far away, heard this, A white light suddenly flashed in his mind, Xian formation. After his reminder, the little girl finally revealed a look of realization. It is like a Xian formation. Daddy, look, it is very similar to the Xian formations you showed me before. At the age of 7 or 8, she had already started cultivating, but she still maintained the most honest view of everything. When she saw the scattered rocks in the sky, she felt that they were very familiar. However, the middle-aged man who was being pulled by her did not have the heart to care about this. He just treated it as his child's babbling. Those rocks had already displayed god domains, which was strange enough, and now she was saying that they had constructed a Xian formation. It was obvious that it was impossible. He did not say anything, but he held his daughter in his arms with heartache. His poor child was still so young, and this time, however, Duan Qingchuan stared at the sky and said word by word, "It is not like a Xian formation. It is a Xian formation." Every word was sonorous and forceful. Many people, including the middle-aged man, subconsciously raised their heads to look at the sky. In the sky, countless rocks were scattered around the ball of light of the god-destroying tribulation. At first glance, it was a mess. However, if one observed carefully, they would find that there was indeed some kind of pattern in the arrangement of these rocks. The horizontal and vertical lines intertwined with each other, but they were perfectly integrated. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1911. There were god domains wrapped around those stones. At this moment, as if they were being summoned by some kind of power, these god domains surged out from the dusty stones and connected with each other. The dots connected to form a line. The lines connected to form a surface. Above the black sky, these seemingly messy and scattered divine domains began to silently condense. Individually, none of the god domains unleashed by these stones could be considered powerful. In fact, after 10,000 years, these powerful god domains, which once belonged to countless powerful cultivators, were only left with the last remnants of power. These powers might be insignificant. These god domains might not be a concern. However, when they gathered together, the layers of power accumulated and accumulated into a shockingly vast pressure. The sky collapsed, and the entire peach blossom dock fell into a long night. However, there were still stars twinkling in the night sky, emitting a lustrous glow. The god domains of countless stones connected with each other, forming a brilliant and flexible net. The most dazzling thing was the center of the net, which was a ball of brilliant and gorgeous light. It was as if a breeze was blowing, gently lifting up this huge net. In an instant, the sound of surging tides could be heard. Whoosh! Abundant heaven and earth energy surged along with it. Even the huge ball of light seemed to be affected. It swayed back and forth in the huge net that rose and fell. Everyone in Peach Blossom Dock looked at this scene in a daze. That was, someone shook the god-destroying tribulation? However, at this moment, who else could do this other than Chu Liwei, who was in the middle of it? This absurd and crazy thought surged in the minds of countless people, but they forcefully suppressed it. Impossible. The terrifying energy of the god-destroying tribulation was something that even the Nan family's venerable god expert could not resist. Let alone Chu Liwei, who was merely a god expert. Countless people held their breaths. The entire Peach Blossom Dock seemed to have quieted down. At this moment, every pair of eyes was looking at that brilliant ball of light. It swayed gently, and the power on it seemed to be constantly being reduced. The surrounding god domains were madly devouring its power. Streams of light of various colors flew and surged rapidly in the night sky, as if they were weaving a beautiful piece of silk. She's crazy. How dare she snatch the power of the god-destroying tribulation? Luo Yan finally could not help but exclaim in shock. He, who had always kept a poker face, couldn't control himself at this moment. His face was full of shock. Previously, when they had obtained the flowing cloud flying diagram, they had already retreated far away. However, from where he stood, he could still clearly see the situation on Chu Liue's side. On top of that, they were all gods, so they were extremely sensitive to energy fluctuations and changes. Therefore, after watching for a while, they were shocked to find that the power of the god-slaying tribulation was being dispersed. Chu Luiwei was really crazy. He actually dared to do this. This was simply snatching food from a tiger's mouth. The elders were also in disbelief. God-destroying tribulation. The others didn't even have time to dodge, but she actually had the guts. Could it be that she wanted to fight against the heavenly Tao with her mortal body? How powerful is the deity annihilation tribulation? How could it allow her to be so impudent? Luo Yan sucked in a breath of cold air. He only felt that today he had already seen all kinds of scenes that he had never seen in the past half of his life. Not long after he finished speaking, the deity annihilation tribulation suddenly shone brightly. His heart skipped a beat, and he retreated again. The remaining 3 elders also sensed that something was amiss and followed closely behind. Boom! An earth-shattering explosion suddenly came from the sky. An extremely dazzling firework bloomed in the black night sky. The deity annihilation tribulation had completely exploded. The boundless energy accumulated within it surged out in all directions like a tide. It covered the sky and covered the earth, vast and mighty. That beautiful light was like a torrential flood that poured down in torrents, destroying everything in its path. It devoured everything. The vast and deep sky was instantly enveloped by this brilliant color. Sun Yi strengthened the barrier in front of him again. However, the power of the deity annihilation tribulation was too strong. It almost didn't stop at all and destroyed his barrier. In a moment of desperation, Sanson also hurriedly attacked. A blue flame instantly formed into a ball, encircling the figures of the few people within it. The energy rushed over, and the round ball quickly dodged to the side, narrowly avoiding it. The edge of the round ball brushed past a ray of colorful flowing light, giving off a piercing chila sound. Sanson suddenly spat out a mouthful of blood. The others hurriedly went forward and injected their power into Sanson's body. Only then did Sanson's expression become slightly better. But at this time, he couldn't care about that. He only took a deep breath and hurriedly raised his head to look in the direction of Chu Liwei. Master, it was a pity that the area was covered by thousands of rays of light and they couldn't see anything at all. As for the people in Peach Blossom Dock City, they had also sunk into a deep panic. They watched as the flowing light rushed to the top of Peach Blossom Dock City walls like water. This brilliant light was so bright, as if it had gathered the world's most moving and rich colors, causing one's heart to waver. However, at this moment, no one was in the mood to admire this magnificent and shocking scene. Because they were very clear that once this flowing light fell like a waterfall, the entire Peach Blossom Dock City would be destroyed. And they, too, would cease to exist. The atmosphere was cold and stagnant. Father, are we going to die? The little girl, who was quite excited about her discovery, finally realized that something was wrong and asked timidly. Her father hugged her tightly. Darling, don't be afraid. Father is here. Duan Qingxuan's heart seemed to be tightly gripped by something and he couldn't breathe. Hurried footsteps suddenly came from behind him. He turned back to look. The person who came was Yan Qing. Yan, Duan Qingxuan was about to speak when he saw Yan Qing shake his head slightly. And his gaze was fixed on the sky. Duan Qingxuan seemed to have sensed something and turned his head to look again. A tall and slender white figure had appeared in front of the stream of light without anyone noticing. Rong Xiu crossed his hands in front of him and 2 balls of flames were burning in the depths of his deep phoenix eyes. One was bright gold. The other was dark. A huge golden bounded domain suddenly appeared. It seemed that it had blocked all the flowing light. The torrent didn't stop and rushed forward. Just as the 2 forces were about to collide, a clear voice suddenly came. Stop! Along with this voice, the endless colorful flowing light that was surging forward actually stopped in front of the golden bounded domain. Everyone was stunned and subconsciously looked towards the direction of the voice. They saw an exquisite figure standing in the air. She held a shield in front of her with both hands. Everyone couldn't see her face and could only see a head of black hair fluttering in the wind. On the shield, there was a glimmer of light. Clang. She suddenly smashed the shield down heavily. Beneath her feet, the 3,000 divine domains suddenly moved. It was as if a mighty pressure from ancient times was surging in all directions. Digression. It took a lot of energy and effort to write this part, but I've finally finished it. Updated at 6:00 p.m. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1912. The gorgeous flowing light that almost covered the entire sky finally began to collapse inch by inch after a short pause. The God-destroying tribulation shattered into countless pieces of starlight and fell into the 3,000 god domains that filled the sky. It was like a river of stars splashing down, and countless brilliant lights flew up. The strong wind blew, and the woman's red dress fluttered. All kinds of beautiful and brilliant lights flickered around her, but they were not as bright as her. The scene seemed to be frozen, but she was 1,000 times more intense than the faint ink. All of a sudden, it seemed to give people an illusion. The sky fell and the earth cracked, and she was the only god. Countless people looked up with dazed expressions, and this scene was forever engraved in their hearts. No matter how much time had passed, there would always be people who would remember that there was once a woman who single-handedly turned the tide in such a dangerous situation. She was the one who made the flowing light flow backward. She was the one who made the rushing flow backward. She was the one who truly relied on her mortal body to withstand the God-destroying tribulation. The thick smell of blood spread between her lips and teeth. Her heart was beating violently, as if it would jump out of her chest at any time. Her head was throbbing with pain, and her last string was pulled tight. A numb and dull pain came from her arms. Sticky dark red blood seeped out from her hands. Chu Luiyue took a deep breath and forced herself to swallow this breath. Clang. There seemed to be an invisible hand that was plucking the delicate strings in her body. The sound of the zither was bleak and solemn, but it quickly woke her up. She raised her eyes and looked around. What entered her eyes was a sea of brilliant light. The God-destroying tribulation had collapsed, forming countless brilliant flowing lights that were rushing back and forth in the sky above her. And beneath her feet were the 3,000 god domains that were formed by the stones. Chu Luiyue was moved, and she sighed softly. The god domains of the gods really can't be underestimated. In the beginning, she really had no other way. She finally chose to try this method out of helplessness. She did not dare to have any hope in her heart. After all, when she brought these stones back from the god-destroying mound, they did not seem to be particularly powerful. Although each stone contained a god domain, they were not considered powerful. At that time, Chu Luiyue also felt that they were too clingy. He couldn't persuade them otherwise, so he chose to take them away. Although these stones were occasionally mischievous, most of the time they were very gentle and obedient. Chu Luiyue had never thought that the first time he used them to construct a profound formation, it would erupt with such a powerful and unparalleled power. What surprised her the most was that after these divine domains fused with each other, the surging battle intent increased exponentially. She could even feel an unprecedented and indestructible determination from it. It was a madness and persistence that she had never felt before. It was an astonishing will that had been passed down from the battlefield 10,000 years ago. For a moment, Chu Luiyue even thought that it was a god-destroying tribulation. Even if it was the sky, they could completely overturn it. At this moment, a colorful stream of light suddenly flew over. The 13th Yugard, who had just calmed down, felt her heart tighten again when she saw this. "Master, be careful." Chu Luiyue shook her head lightly, indicating that they didn't need to worry. She didn't feel any threat from that stream of light. On the contrary, she even felt a faint sense of inspiration. This feeling was very subtle and indescribable. However, she knew that it wouldn't hurt her. Soon, that stream of light flew in front of her. As if subconsciously, Chu Luiyue stretched out a hand. Her hand had suffered a great amount of pressure when she used the shield to block the god-destroying tribulation. At this moment, it was already badly mutilated. Rong Xiu's phoenix eyes darkened slightly. A trace of coldness flashed across his eyes, but it disappeared in an instant. Immediately after, that stream of light flew into Chu Liuyue's hand. The moment it touched her body, that stream of light quickly condensed into a translucent and gorgeous soft armor that gently covered the back of her hand. That thing was only half the size of a palm. Its shape was irregular, but it was extremely exquisite and luxurious. A faint pressure was emitted from it. Chu Liyue was slightly shocked. Soon, the second stream of light flew in and stuck tightly to the first piece of the gorgeous soft armor. At the same time, the wound that was covered by the soft armor began to heal at an astonishing speed. In the blink of an eye, that shocking wound quickly healed and formed a scab. Soon, that layer of shallow scar peeled off bit by bit. The wound healed as if it was never there. It didn't look like she had been injured at all. This time, even Chu Liyue was shocked. She was a celestial physician. She knew all too well how difficult it was to heal such an injury to its original state. Moreover, it was done in such a short time. More and more streams of light were flying toward her. Just as Chu Liyue was filled with doubts, a wave suddenly came from her dantian. Chu Liyue looked over and was shocked to find that a small illusory figure had appeared in her body without her noticing. It was right under the zither score that had transformed into water droplets. The figure was transparent, but its shape and appearance were exactly the same as Chu Liyue's. At this moment, the right hand of the transparent figure was shining with a gorgeous light. It was exactly the same as the soft armor that covered Chu Liyue's body. Chu Liyue was stunned for a moment, and a bold idea suddenly came to her mind. This was a divine body? As soon as this idea came to her mind, it immediately set off huge waves in Chu Liyue's heart. A few years ago, when she came to the Divine Ruins world, although she was in the limelight at Lingxiao College, she hadn't cultivated a divine body at that time. After breaking through to the high god level, she smoothly condensed a godly domain. However, a divine body was different from a godly domain. One had to know that not every high god could cultivate a divine body. There were all kinds of divine bodies in the world. In Lingxiao College, Chu Liyue had read countless books on cultivating a divine body. She had tried to do it more than once. However, she didn't know why she couldn't succeed. She was extremely talented on the path of cultivation. She had never encountered any obstacles along the way. It wasn't until she started to cultivate her divine body that she encountered failure after failure. She was Nansu Huai's only disciple, and all the methods of cultivating a divine body that she had seen and learned were absolutely outstanding. However, no matter which method she tried, she couldn't succeed. In the end, even Nansu Huai couldn't stand it anymore. At that time, he said that since this was the case, it meant that she had a divine body that should belong to her. Only when the opportunity came, could she cultivate it. As for the other divine bodies, she wasn't fated to be with them, so there was no need to continue trying. Chu Liyue had always been skeptical about these words. She only thought that her master was comforting her, so she agreed. Since then, she didn't try to cultivate a divine body by force. She never expected that she would have a divine body today. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1913. A thought suddenly flashed across Chu Liyue's mind. This divine body was formed from the power of the God-destroying tribulation. Even she could not help but gasp when she thought of this. Her heart was beating violently. A divine body formed by the God-destroying tribulation, it was easy to imagine how powerful it was. Chu Liyue had imagined countless times what kind of divine body she would cultivate. When this day came, she was shocked and could not recover for a long time. She lowered her eyes slightly. At this moment, more and more beautiful soft armor covered her body. The divine body in her dantian was also condensing. It gradually turned from transparent to gorgeous. Some of the flowing light in the sky flew into the 3,000 god regions. Most of them turned into soft armor and embedded themselves around Chu Liyue. She closed her eyes gently and began to cultivate while holding her breath. The power around her flowed into her body continuously. Her aura was also rising continuously. Everyone was stunned by what they saw. There was dead silence in Peach Blossom Dock City. Everything in front of them changed too quickly. They did not even have time to react. They were facing a life and death crisis a moment ago. In the blink of an eye, the crisis was over? The impact of this was simply too great. The little girl, who was held tightly in her father's arms, was confused. She stretched out her hand and pointed to the sky. She said softly, "Daddy, it's dawn." Hearing this, the middle-aged man was stunned. He looked up instinctively. What he saw stunned him on the spot. Sure enough, a ray of light shone through the originally dark and gloomy sky. Although it was faint, it was that. Moreover, that ray of light seemed to be spreading to the surroundings. After a while, he finally realized something. His eyes widened. The barrier of Peach Blossom Dock is recovering? There was a clap of thunder. Everyone was filled with shock when they heard this. Many pairs of eyes looked at the sky. It seems that the barrier is recovering? Don't you feel that the wild space turbulence seems to be restrained? The mountain fire is also gradually extinguishing. They were in the middle of it. They could feel the changes in the energy most clearly. The space that had been crazily squeezing and contracting seemed to have suddenly stopped, and was gradually returning to its original state. That suffocating pressure also seemed to quietly dissipate. Duan Qingxuan could not help but mutter in a low voice, "Peach Blossom Dock is alive?" Yan Qing let out a long sigh. Her Highness, truly amazing. Actually, it wasn't that he wasn't worried before. However, Master insisted on not making a move. At most, he only set up a barrier. But before they could be used, the princess consort had already taken care of them. Gradually, some people in the crowd regained their senses. Is this all thanks to Shangguanyu? As soon as his voice fell, the bustling street immediately fell into a dead silence. Everyone had complicated expressions on their faces. In actual fact, they more or less had some complaints about Chu Luiyue previously. If she had not offended the Black Sword sect and the Nan family, perhaps this crisis would not have occurred. However, after experiencing all this, they knew very well that the survival of so many people in Peach Blossom Dock was indeed because of Chu Luiyue. She was the one who withstood the god-destroying tribulation. She was also the one who saved the people in the city in time. Peach Blossom Dock, which was about to collapse, was starting to recover bit by bit. Who could say that this was not due to her efforts? In fact, they also knew very well that she was the most innocent one in all of this. The ones who really started this conflict were the Black Sword sect and the Nan family. And now, everyone was relying on her to survive. How could they have the nerve to blame her for all this? Hey, I don't care about others, but my life was indeed saved by Shangguanyu. I owe her a debt of gratitude, and I will repay her kindness. In the crowd, a dark-skinned burly man suddenly spoke with a voice full of energy. He cupped his fists and saluted in the direction of Chu Luiyue. In the future, if anyone dares to make things difficult for her, don't blame me for not showing mercy. After a short moment of silence, all sorts of voices were heard. Me too. She saved my life, and I will remember it in my heart. I heard that the third boss of the Yu residence is one of her people? Hee, I have long wanted to go to the Yu residence to take a look. When this matter is over, I will go there and see if I can find any work. Ah, you little brat, you're really dreaming. Even if you are willing to go, they might not be willing to accept you. The Yu residence's vetting is very strict. I think I am quite suitable. Tise, you guys are way too selfish. I am different from you. I will not join the Yu residence, but if that person and the Yu residence need anything in the future, I will go through water and tread on fire. Many people expressed their opinions, and the atmosphere quickly became lively. Duan Qingxuan looked at Yan Qing with a strange expression. The two of them quickly exchanged glances. Yan Qing raised an eyebrow. This was indeed not arranged by them. It seemed that there were really people who wanted to seek refuge with the Yu residence, but thinking about it carefully, it was normal. Ink Sword sect had been destroyed, and the Yu residence was one of the best in the entire Peach Blossom Cove. Even if there were some who could compete with them, after this incident, they could not be compared to them. After all, Everyone now knew that the real master of the Yu residence was Chu Luiyue. In today's battle, Chu Luiyue had saved the entire Peach Blossom Cove. Everyone here owed her their lives. Who else could have such an advantage? Besides that, Chu Luiyue's peerless strength was enough to make countless people admire and follow her. She was a high god, summoned the god-destroying tribulation and won. With such talent and battle strength, how many people in the world could be on par with her? In the Peach Blossom Cove, the strong were respected. And Chu Luiyue, after this battle, had undoubtedly become a peerless expert in the hearts of countless people. Chu Luiyue held her breath and concentrated. The power of the god-destroying tribulation was gradually being devoured by her. Countless soft armor covered her entire body, and even her neck and face were covered by the translucent soft armor. The last ray of light finally landed in between her eyebrows. The moment it covered her, her eyebrows suddenly burned with a scorching heat. A totem suddenly flashed into existence. Digression, maybe it was because I fell sick a while ago, and my body was overdrawn. I have rested a lot in the past few days, and I will try to recover tomorrow. Thank you for your understanding. On mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1914. Chu Luiyue let out a clear cry. She had achieved the phenomenal success of her divine body. A beautiful soft armor covered her body. It was dazzling. Light poured down from the sky and shone on her body, reflecting fragments of sparkling light. She opened her eyes abruptly. A vast and majestic aura erupted from her body. Everyone was in awe. Even though Chu Luiyue was only a high deity, her divine body's suppression was comparable to her eminence's. Chu Luiyue exhaled deeply as she felt the vigorous power surging in her body. Phew, so this was what it felt like to have a divine body. She looked down. The Peach Blossom Dock was in a mess. The inside of the city was still fine, but the continuous mountain range outside the city was almost completely destroyed. There were ravines everywhere, and there were traces of fire everywhere. The strong smell of blood filled the air. Chu Luiyue frowned slightly. She was undoubtedly partly responsible for the Peach Blossom Dock's current state. She raised her hand and put away the shield in her hand. Then she took a step forward. The divine domain under her feet rippled lightly and then quietly dissipated. The stones withdrew their divine domains and returned to their normal grayish-white appearance. Chu Luiyue waved her hand, and the stones flew back to her. The stones in front of her jumped a few times in front of her, as if they were eager to be praised. The stones in the row behind them also jumped up and fought to be first. If it weren't for the fact that Chu Luiyue had repeatedly taught them to be obedient and that nobody was allowed to cut the queue, it would have been a mess by now. Looking at the pile of stones jumping around, Chu Luiyue's lips couldn't help but curl up, and a smile appeared in her eyes. Good job. Hearing the praise, the stones were very happy and jumped back into her interspatial ring. Everyone was dumbfounded. Could this be? Chu Luiyue did not care about them. After all, they had seen what they should and should not see. In that case, there was nothing to hide. Also, she could take this opportunity to let the people in the Peach Blossom Dock owe her a favor. Actually, she didn't think too much about it at first. But now that things had come to this, it was not without benefits. Most of the energy of the god-destroying tribulation had been swallowed by Chu Luiyue to refine his god body. As for the remaining portion, it had fused into the rocks. Chu Luiyue could clearly feel that the divine domain above was much stronger than before. This was a pleasant surprise. Finally, Chu Luiyue flipped his wrist and took out an item. The people below watched from afar, unable to see clearly. What's that in her hand? I don't know. It's too small. It looks like a sprout. Just as everyone was puzzled, they saw Chu Luiyue gently wave his hand. A verdant leaf swayed in the wind. Then the abundant energy between heaven and earth began to surge. Hula! The energy was like a tide, surging violently. A ray of sunlight shone down. In the distance, the enchantment of the Peach Blossom Dock began to reform. Is that Tu Tian baby? Someone murmured in disbelief. Everyone was shocked. That was a rare treasure. Chu Luiwei even had this? Just how many trump cards did she have on her? Chu Liuyue's motive for summoning the two Tian baby was simple. After all the previous torment, the void of the Peach Blossom Dock had collapsed beyond recognition. The energy was rampaging, and the entire space was almost completely destroyed. Even though she had successfully passed the God-destroying tribulation, everything here still needed to be sorted out and organized. The two Tian baby could easily control the vigorous energy of heaven and earth. Naturally, it was the perfect choice. The result was as expected. With just a thought, the two Tian baby began to deal with the chaotic energy. The enchantment of the Peach Blossom Dock quickly reformed. Compared to before, there was a subtle difference. A faint, beautiful light appeared on the enchantment. From afar, it looked like countless colorful light spots were sprinkled on it, emitting a lustrous glow. That was the residual energy of the God-destroying tribulation. However, apart from looking different, the biggest difference between this newly formed enchantment and the previous one was that it was several times stronger than before. In fact, the entire Peach Blossom Dock had undergone the baptism of the God-destroying tribulation and had been reborn. All the unstable void after it had completely collapsed relied on the energy of the God-destroying tribulation to rebuild and become incomparably stable. Abundant energy of heaven and earth surged back and forth. Feeling this huge and subtle change, Chu Luiwei sighed deeply in her heart. Destruction followed by reconstruction. This was the Peach Blossom Dock of today. Congratulations, you. Rong Xiu moved and came to Chu Luiwei's side. His handsome and charming face was filled with a warm smile. Between his eyebrows, there was undisguised affection and pride. This was his Yu. From the beginning to the end, he had insisted on not interfering. Although his heart ached, he knew that she could do it. As expected, this huge Peach Blossom Dock had completely become her domain from now on. In this world, there was no one else who could be compared to her. She was the brightest pearl. No matter where she was, she could blossom in a myriad of ways. Chu Luiwei raised her eyes and looked into his deep eyes. She also raised the corners of her lips. With just one look, they could understand each other's feelings. She knew that Rong Xiu was proud of her and happy for her. You already thought of this? Chu Luiwei asked with interest. Rong Xiu's smile deepened. The God-destroying tribulation. I really didn't expect it. He didn't expect it to come so quickly. In the beginning, he didn't interfere because he knew that she was dissatisfied with the Black Sword sect and the Nan family. He wanted to let her fight to her heart's content and vent her dissatisfaction. But later, it was indeed unexpected. Of course, she was always able to surprise him. The sky gradually brightened. The flames in various places had already been extinguished. Abundant energy of heaven and earth surged out. The two Tian baby had an extremely vigorous vitality. In this kind of situation, it could play a huge role. Chu Luiwei glanced out of the corner of her eyes. Suddenly, she saw that there seemed to be something reflecting the clear light below. She focused her eyes and saw that a lake had appeared in the midst of the messy mountain range. Under the sunlight, the surface of the lake rippled. There were piles of rocks by the lake. A stream flowed down, spreading out into a clear and shallow stream. Fresh green shoots sprouted from the side of the lake. Chu Luiwei widened her eyes slightly. This lake, looks like I've seen it before. Suddenly, a white light flashed in her mind. Isn't this the small space that Sanson had previously? The barrier above was still there. From the outside, it still looked like a lake. However, a stream diverged from it and extended all over the mountains and plains. Everywhere it passed, it was a scene full of vitality. A faint fragrance of herbs pervaded the air. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1915. My baby. Sanson's heart ached when she saw this. Little Hachi rolled her eyes. What are you yelling for? Isn't it just a portion of the energy from that small space? This is a good thing for the entire Peach Blossom Dock and our master. Don't delay it. Sanson's cheeks twitched as she felt wronged. Although little Hachi was younger in terms of seniority, no one in the 13U sect dared to argue with her except for her big brother. Even as the third brother, he felt the same way. I know. I'm just feeling sorry for you. With the nourishment from that small space, the peach blossom dock, which was almost completely destroyed, would recover at a much faster speed. Along the banks of the stream, if nothing went wrong, there should be many heavenly treasures growing in the future. This was a huge fortune. As long as the peach blossom dock could recover quickly, it would be great for their master. After today, the entire peach blossom dock will belong to our master. 13 muttered softly. There was still a look of shock on his face, which still had a hint of youthfulness, and it hadn't faded away. He had always known that his master was powerful. But over the years, he had spent most of his time with his big brother and the rest. When he was by his master's side, it was actually pitiful. Plus, he was young and had never seen Chu Luye fight with his own eyes. And this time, it had undoubtedly brought him a huge shock. Sun Yi's eyes relaxed and a trace of a smile appeared in his usually indifferent eyes. This was the master's intention for coming here this time. But he didn't expect that after all these twists and turns, it would be completed smoothly in advance. And the entire peach blossom dock was taken care of. His master didn't like the options that Sanson had given him. Now that the last hidden danger of peach blossom dock was eliminated, his master would take over directly. There was no better result than this. The Nan family. In the study, Nan Yifan stood silently. It was already nighttime. The bright moon hung high in the sky. The cool moonlight flowed in through the window, elongating his shadow. He had been standing in this position from day to night for an entire day. The night wind was cold and his whole body was icy cold. But Nan Yifan didn't feel it at all. He lowered his head slightly. His face was hidden in the darkness and couldn't be seen clearly. Knock knock. There was a knock on the door. Patriarch, you haven't eaten for a day. Why don't you have some food? The one who spoke was his confidant, an elder of the Nan family. It was difficult to conceal the worry in his voice. In fact, to powerhouses at their level, not eating for a day was nothing. The reason why this elder was so worried was because he sensed that something was wrong with Nan Yifan's condition. The last time he was like this was on the day of Nan Yi's funeral. But at that time, he had only stood for half a day. But this time, something had clearly happened, and it was even more terrifying than Nan Yi's death. The elder standing outside the door was burning with anxiety. Nan Yi was the apple of Nan Yifan's eyes. What could hurt him more than her death? This elder knew that Luo Yannan and Yu Xing had gone to the Peach Blossom Cove. Therefore, he was particularly frightened at this moment. He wanted to ask for an explanation, but he didn't dare. You can leave first. After a while, Nan Yifan finally spoke. His voice was low and hoarse. The elder outside the door moved his lips and the uneasiness in his heart grew stronger, but he didn't dare to say anything. Yes. Just as he was about to turn around and leave, he heard Nan Yifan say, "Wait." Then he heard the door open. The elder hurriedly turned around and saw Nan Yifan open the door and walk out. Stay here. I'll go to the family. Digression 6.0 Clocked mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 1916. The elder was shocked when he heard this. Patriarch means... Nan Yifan nodded. But it was already late at night. The elder didn't finish his sentence. Because Nan Yifan raised his head and glanced at him. It was only a day, but Nan Yifan looked like he had aged more than 10 years. Under the faint moonlight, the elder even saw that his hair had turned white. His face, which was always high-spirited, was now haggard. Although the light was dim, the elder still saw Nan Yifan's bloodshot eyes. The moment he met Nan Yifan's gaze, he was instantly speechless. He couldn't say the rest of the words. He didn't know how to describe this feeling. Desolation, fragility, regret, resentment. It was as if all the negative emotions had gathered together. A heavy and oppressive aura spread from Nan Yifan's body. It was so oppressive that she couldn't breathe. Immediately, Nan Yifan said. The elder's heart skipped a beat, and he instinctively felt that something had happened. He had never seen the patriarch like this. Could it be that the eldest young master and the others? He quickly lowered his head and replied in a low voice. With me here, please rest assured, patriarch. Nan Yifan nodded and then walked past him. A biting cold killing intent was faintly discernible. The elder's heart skipped a beat. When he came back to his senses and wanted to turn around and say a few more words, he found that Nan Yifan's figure had already disappeared. The elder, who was left in place, frowned. His heart was beating fast, as if it was being gripped tightly by something. A strong sense of uneasiness welled up in his heart. When Nan Yi died, although the patriarch was very sad, it wasn't to this extent. It went without saying what had happened. After a long time, he finally sighed. I'm afraid the world of divine ruins will be in chaos again. Nan Yifan was very fast. It took him a night to come to Meihe County. This was the family Yi's territory. Unlike the mountainous terrain of the Nan family, Meihe County was a vast and boundless plain. On the green land, a wide and clear river meandered through. Plum blossoms meandered along the riverside. Behind the plum forest stood a grand and luxurious city. Above the city gate, there was a golden plaque with the words, Meihe County. There were guards in martial attire standing guard at the city gate. When Nan Yifan arrived, the sky was just beginning to brighten. There was almost no one coming in and out of the city gate. Therefore, when he appeared, he immediately attracted the attention of the guards. Who are you? The guards immediately became alert and held their swords in front of them. Meihe County was Family Yi's territory. Normally, only Family Yi's people would enter and leave. It was indeed suspicious that someone would come over so early in the morning. Nan Yifan directly revealed his identity. Go inform your patriarch that Nan Yifan of the Nan clan has come to visit. Nan Yifan? Why was he here all of a sudden? At the Yi residence, the head of family Yi Wentao looked up from his book in surprise when he heard this. How many people did he bring? Patriarch Nan didn't bring anyone with him. He came alone. Moreover, he seemed to be in a hurry, as if he had something important to do. The guard who came to report asked respectfully, Patriarch, do you want to see him or not? Of course. Yi Wentao stood up, closed the book, and put it aside. He was very tall and looked to be no more than 36 or 37 years old. His facial features were handsome and elegant. He was dressed in a stone-green robe, which made him look like a refined scholar. Anyone who saw him would find it hard to imagine that he was the current head of Family Yi. In the world of divine ruins, there were very few rumors about Yi Wentao. In everyone's imagination, Yi Wentao should be fierce and ruthless. It seemed that only in that way could he control the entire Family Yi. But in reality, he was very different from what most people imagined him to be. Patriarch Nan, please come to the living room. I'll come later. Yes. The guard received the order and quickly left. Yi Wentao looked at his back as he left in a hurry, and his eyebrows moved slightly. The Nan clan and family Yi didn't have much contact with each other. And he knew a little about Nan Yifan. This person was proud by nature. Now that he suddenly came in person, something must have happened. Yi Wentao's heart was pounding. He didn't know what had happened that could make Nan Yifan put aside his pride and come in person. He thought for a while and didn't have an answer. Finally, he decided to meet Nan Yifan first. You can cultivate here in peace. No one will disturb you. He suddenly turned around and said. Behind the 8 screens on the rosewood base, a figure was vaguely reflected. Yes. His voice was low and slightly hoarse, but it also contained a bit of laziness. Yi Wentao nodded. Only then did he walk out and personally lock the door. After telling the servants to guard the place well, he turned around and left. Not long after Nan Yifan was led into the living room, Yi Wentao came. Brother Nan, what wind blew you here today? Yi Wentao walked in with an eager smile. Nan Yifan looked up. The two looked at each other for a moment, a silent confrontation. A trace of surprise flashed across Yi Wentao's eyes. In his impression, Nan Yifan was always high-spirited and proud. But this time, he was visibly haggard, and his hair was stained with white frost. What did he go through? Just as Yi Wentao was guessing in his heart, Nan Yifan had already spoken. I'm here because I have something important to discuss with Brother Yi. After that, he paused for a moment. Yi Wentao quickly reacted, waved his hand, and dismissed the servants. All of you leave first. Family head, the confidant accompanying him, was a little hesitant. Nan Yifan didn't look too good like this. If he went crazy and did something, leave. Yi Wentao's voice turned cold. This was family. Nan Yifan dared to come alone. Did he not even have the guts to talk to him alone? Wouldn't that be a joke? The people below all knew his temper, so they didn't dare to say more and hurriedly left. Before he left, he even closed the door carefully. No one dared to eavesdrop here. He walked over and sat opposite Nan Yifan. His expression had returned to its usual gentle and calm. Brother Nan, if you have something to say, just say it. Nan Yifan stared at him. I'm here this time to form an alliance with you. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1917. Nan Yifan said word by word. Every word seemed to carry an indescribable heavy stench and resentment. Yi Wentao was slightly stunned, then smiled. Brother Nan, are you joking? After all, the relationship between family Yi and the Nan family had never been close. At this time, Nan Yifan suddenly came alone and asked for an alliance. How could Yi Wentao not be surprised? But Nan Yifan's expression didn't change. As long as Brother Yi is willing to agree, you can name any conditions. Yi Wentao's smile gradually disappeared. He looked at Nan Yifan and carefully observed his expression, pondering inwardly. This sentence, from Nan Yifan's mouth, was extremely rare. At the same time, it also showed Nan Yifan's determination this time. Did he really come to win over family Yi? But the Nan family and family Yi's status were equal. Why would he do this? After thinking about it, Yi Wentao decided to ask first. Brother Nan, don't worry. If you really encounter difficulties, family Yi will not stand by and do nothing. I just don't know, what is it that needs to make Brother Nan so worried? Nan Yifan paused. The Nan family wants to fight with Yuntian Tower. Yi Wentao's expression finally changed. Yuntian Tower? You want to go against the Holy Sun? Nan Yifan nodded. Yi Wentao frowned. Brother Nan, I'm afraid I can't agree to this. Was this Nan Yifan crazy? Why would he want to fight with Rong Xiu? Nan Yifan wasn't surprised by Yi Wentao's answer. In fact, a day ago, he wouldn't have thought that he would make such a decision. But things were unpredictable. At this point, he had no way out. The moment Yu Xing's jade broke, he knew that he couldn't endure it anymore. He could not completely blame Yi's death on them, but Yu Xing, his years of hard work had all gone to waste. As I said, I will agree to any condition of Brother Yi. Nan Yi's tone was much heavier than before. Yi Wentao's frown deepened. Nan Yifan knew how dangerous it was to go against Rong Xiu. Why did he have to do this? He was even willing to pay a huge price for it. Yi Wentao shook his head. Brother Nan, you know very well that this matter is not that simple. In the end, he didn't want to offend Rong Xiu for the sake of the Nan family. Brother Nan, you should know how difficult it is to deal with that person. If he chose to go against Yuntian Tower, it would not end well for him. Why must Brother Nan do this? If there's a misunderstanding between you and Yuntian Tower, I can step forward and mediate. Perhaps, since Nan Yifan had personally come looking for him, Rong Xiu would definitely know about this matter. Then, no matter what he said, it was impossible for him to walk out of this quagmire clean. Instead of being secretive and arousing suspicion for no reason, it was better to be honest with him. In this way, he could also do the Nan family a favor. In Yi Wentao's opinion, this was the best choice. However, Nan Yifan interrupted him. There's no possibility of reconciliation between Yuntian Tower and me. Yi Wentao looked at him suspiciously. Brother Nan, you mean, Nan Yifan took a deep breath and looked straight at Yi Wentao. Yi and Yuxing were both killed by them. Yi Wentao was shocked at first, but then he immediately understood. No wonder. Those two children were Nan Yifan's lifeblood. Especially Nan Yuxing, who was basically confirmed to be the next patriarch of the Nan family. Because both of them were very outstanding, Nan Yifan had always been proud of himself as the patriarch. Now that both of them were dead, not only did Nan Yifan have no descendants, but his position as the patriarch would also be unstable in the future. Even Yi Wentao knew that there were many people in the Nan family who secretly coveted the position of the patriarch. Nan Yifan did this to avenge his children and to protect his position as the patriarch. These two things were the most important to him. No wonder he came today. In fact, what Yi Wentao didn't know was that there was a very important reason why Nan Yifan chose to do this. Even if he didn't do this, Rong Xiu wouldn't let him go. With Rong Xiu's intelligence, since he had already killed Nan Yuxing, he would definitely find out that Nan Yifan was behind this. How could he just let it go? After the matter at Peach Blossom Dock was over, he would definitely make a move. At that time, Nan Yifan and the others would be in a passive position. Instead of sitting and waiting for death, it was better to make a move first. There might even be a chance of survival. Nan Yifan really had no other choice. How could he not be in awe of Rong Xiu? If it wasn't for the fact that he really had no other way out, he wouldn't have done this. After knowing that Nan Yuxing had died, he stood in the study for an entire day. He seemed to have done nothing, but in fact he had thought a lot. He regretted it. Even he didn't know why he tacitly allowed Nan Yuxing and the others to go to Peach Blossom Dock quietly at that time. It was as if he had made that decision by accident. Perhaps it was because he felt guilty towards Nan Yi and also resentful towards Rong Xiu and Chu Luiyue. He thought that they didn't bring many people with them and it was really the best time to make a move in a place like Peach Blossom Dock. What if he succeeded? It was this, what if, and all those thoughts that made Nan Yifan make this decision that he would regret for the rest of his life. At this point, there was no use in regretting it. He could only fight back. Yi Wentao didn't know this. But in his opinion, the reasons that Nan Yifan said were enough to support him to make such a choice. He was silent for a long time, but he was still unwilling to agree. Brother Nan, others may not know, but you know, that person is really not easy to deal with. Perhaps this was Nan Yifan's only choice. But what did this have to do with his family Yi? If he got involved in this matter for no reason, not only would he not get any benefits, but he would also get himself into trouble. Yi Wentao never made a losing deal. Seeing that he was in such a difficult position, Nan Yifan sneered in his heart, but he didn't show it on his face. He suddenly said, "Brother Yi, do you know that Rong Xiu and Shangguanyu went to the god-slaying tomb and took something from the black wall?" Yi Wentao suddenly looked up. He restrained his expression, but Nan Yifan was also sharp-eyed. How could he not see the surging waves in his eyes? As for what it is, I think Brother Yi should know without me saying it, right? Nan Yifan suddenly laughed. The Holy Sun's princess is not a simple person. The heavenly square cauldron and the 2 Tian baby are both in her hands. In addition, she has an unknown black shield in her hand. Although it looks ordinary, it is not inferior to any venerable artifact. When Nan Yifan said this, he didn't notice that Yi Wentao quickly frowned when he heard about the black shield. It's strange. I heard that Shangguanyu is a person outside the Divine Ruins world, but she seems to have a strong bloodline power. Brother Nan, have you seen her totem? Digression, 7:00 p.m. 5th update. Wow, mobile phone users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 1918. Nan Yifan shook his head. No. There were a lot of rumors about Chu Luiyue in the Divine Ruins world. Especially after her wedding with Rong Xiu, the rumors became even more heated. At first, everyone only thought that she came from a humble background, but a series of things that happened later made everyone know that she actually had several backers behind her. Although Nan Yifan had seen Chu Luiyue before, he had never seen her totem. Brother Yi, why are you suddenly asking about this? Nan Yifan was a little puzzled. Yi Wentao smiled and lowered his eyes. Nothing, I just suddenly thought of this and felt a little curious. I heard that when she tested her bloodline at the Yuntian Tower, the result was the same as the Chosen. If she was really born outside the Divine Ruins world, how could she have the bloodline power? One had to know that only the ancestors who had broken through the shackles and reached the peak strength would have the bloodline power later on. It was impossible for someone outside the Divine Ruins world to do so. Isn't Shangguan Jing her ancestor? As Nan Yifan spoke, he suddenly stopped. It was indeed not right. Although Shangguan Jing was a supreme god expert and used to be in the limelight, when he came to the Divine Ruins world, he seemed to have already established the Tianling dynasty. Later on, he encountered trouble in the Divine Ruins world. His soul scattered and he fell into a deep sleep for 1,000 years. It was not until Chu Luiwei came here that he came back to life. No matter how he thought about it, the bloodline power in Chu Luiwei's body did not seem to be inherited from him. Nan Yifan frowned and glanced at Yi Wentao. Why, Brother Yi seems to be interested in this Shangguan Yu? Yi Wentao smiled. I'm just a little curious. Since Brother Nan doesn't know, then there's nothing to ask. He was always so stubborn that Nan Yifan gradually lost his patience. Brother Yi, let's put these things aside for now. I will only ask you one last time. Do you agree to my previous proposal? Yi Wentao fell into deep thought. The room was silent. Time slowly passed. Every minute and every second was torture for Nan Yifan. But he could only wait. After a while, Yi Wentao finally nodded. I promise you. However, I have a condition. Nan Yifan and Yi Wentao talked for a long time in the room. About an hour later, the door was opened again. Nan Yifan cupped his hands and took his leave. Brother, please wait, I'll be going back now. Yi Wentao knew that it would be hard for him to stay here, so he didn't ask him to stay and just nodded. Brother Nan, be careful. Nan Yifan responded and turned to leave. His figure quickly disappeared into the distance. Yi Wentao didn't look away until his figure disappeared. The sound of footsteps could be heard. Yi Wentao's expression returned to normal as he calmly looked up. The person who came was his second brother, Yi Wenzhua. Big brother, that person just now, was Nan Yifan? In front of Yi Wentao, Yi Wenzhua's attitude was much more restrained. On the surface, Yi Wenzhua looked older than Yi Wentao, but in fact, Yi Wentao was 10 years older than him. It was just that Yi Wentao was extremely talented and his cultivation was very smooth, so he looked younger. He nodded. What is he doing here? Yi Wentao frowned. The Nan family had little contact with them. As the family head, Nan Yifan suddenly came in person. It was hard not to think too much. Yi Wentao smiled faintly. He has his reasons for coming. Yi Wentao felt a little uncomfortable. Big brother clearly didn't want to talk about it. This was nothing. After all, the two of them were not ordinary people. What they discussed together must be important, which couldn't be easily revealed. But he was Big brother's younger brother. Was he not qualified to know? The reason why Yi Wentao was so concerned about this matter was that this was not the first time such a situation had happened. The head of the family Yi was Yi Wentao. Almost all the important matters were decided by him. Here he had absolute power. Yi Wentao had never coveted the position of the head of the family, but over the years, Big brother often didn't tell him anything. In fact, there were many times when many elders knew about it, but he knew nothing about it. Yi Wentao always felt that he was marginalized in the family. After a long time, how could there be no resentment and dissatisfaction? But other than that, Big brother treated him well in other aspects. This made Yi Wentao feel very conflicted. And this time, it was still the same. He endured it for a while, and finally swallowed his anger and changed the topic. I'm here because I have good news to tell Big brother. Jiao Qing has broken through. Yi Wentao raised his eyebrows, seeming a little surprised. So fast? Just now, he had told him to cultivate well. In just a few hours, he had broken through, as expected of you personally taught him. Yi Wentao praised with satisfaction. These words finally improved Yi Wentao's mood. Not at all. After he came back, he has been cultivating with Big brother. With Big brother's guidance, this child naturally broke through quickly. As he spoke, he paused for a moment. Big brother, no matter what, half of family Yi's blood flows in Jiuqing's body. You see, the position of the young master. From the beginning, this was what he had been thinking. Yi Wentao had no children. In the future, he would definitely choose a successor from the younger generation. And Jun Jiuqing was the most suitable one. Yi Wentao put one hand behind his back. He didn't beat around the bush like before. Instead, he seriously thought for a long time. You are right. It is indeed time to choose a young master. Inform everyone that the family meeting will be held tomorrow. Tomorrow? Yi Wentao was a little surprised, but the joy in his heart washed away these emotions. He immediately nodded, unable to hide the excitement in his eyes. Okay, I'll go now. Peach Blossom Dock-U Mansion. Chu Luwei put down the teacup in his hand and looked at Rong Xiu in surprise. Two big families? Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience came from Love Network. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Immortal Journey YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.